Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey, are you an aging athlete? Are you over 40 and struggling to get your desired results? I understand your frustrations. If you're like me, you're trying to get your running back or your cycling back or whatever sport you love to do, and you just can't figure out what's missing in your performance gains. How is your training and fueling program working for you? That's what I do. I personalize your nutrition and health program for you based on a bunch of different things. We collect data, collect clues from nutritional therapy assessment, from a food log with symptoms. Look at your genetics. If you've done something as DNA Fit, look at blood chemistry panels. Let's look at functional lab tests as a Vibrant Wellness wheat zoomer to test if you have leaky gut and sensitivity to wheat, peptides in foods. Look at food sensitivity labs. And Dutch tests, look at your hormones. So we look at all these hidden internal sources of chronic stress that may be impacting your ability to burn fat, improve performance, and longevity. So if you want to talk about how we can personalize your fueling, training, and performance plan, let me know. Set up a discovery call. Head to my website, debbiepotts.net, and reach out. Set up a call and we can chat about how I can help you be the best version of yourself. So you can stop blaming the aging process and instead change your mindset that you're embracing the change, that we train differently in our 40s and up versus what you did when you're 20, 30-year-old. We need to adjust how we eat, when we eat, why and how, but also match our nutrition with our exercise program and add some more health building lifestyle habits into our day. I call this all the holistic method comprehensive coaching program, where I work on individualizing clients' nutrition, exercise, stress reduction, sleep, movement, time outside, digestion and gut health, hydration, and my favorite, happiness, play, and laughter. So if you want to know more how you can be your best self, live your best life, and perform your best, head to debbiepotts.net, schedule a discovery call with me, and we can get started on your new health building journey. You can be that amazing athlete and stop blaming the aging process. Hey there, it's Debbie, and I am going to talk to one of my new friends. I met him at KetoCon. He was working with S Fuels and ENDUREIQ, and I was so excited to run into him because, you're my people, working with endurance athletes and helping them be more fat adapted. And finally, I have Aaron on my show today, and we are going to talk shop, talk about ENDUREIQ, which is Dr. Dan Plew's program, and talk about how Aaron got into all of this. So Aaron got into endurance sports in his late 30s after spending most of his athletic career on more anaerobic activities. And as he made the switch, he knew he needed to change how he fueled to match his training and his goals and skills in his area of endurance sports. So he had been on a low-carb diet, and he experimented with most of the suitable strategy he knew about through trial and error. And then he connected with Dr. Dan Plews, that you may have heard about, and he found out more of the low-carb, healthy fat lifestyle, how it worked better for him as an individual and his endurance sports. So as he progressed as a triathlete, he found out he was good at coaching athletes along the way, and happy that he's out there because he's making it a career and working with ENDUREIQ squad and helping people achieve their goals through training and nutrition. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more. If you don't know about Dr. Dan Plews, you can look at who was the top age group winner and record holder in 2018 Ironman Hawaii. But Aaron, he himself started coaching 9 years ago, and he coached athletes for full and 70.3 Ironman World Championship. and just Ironman in general. He's coached collegiate runners and all sorts of different athletes. He's a big believer in science-based training and the value of metrics in training and racing. Learning and tracking the physical body helps lead to the proper adaptations and with achieving the best results possible. So Aaron Geiser is our guest today. He is fortunate to be working and learning from Dan Plews and the rest of the ENDUREIQ coaching program. This is bringing triathlon plans made with great minds in the sport to assist athletes to find their best self and race ability. It's a great honor for Aaron. So I'm happy to have him share his knowledge on the show. He does have a Bachelor of Science in Athletic Training, Sports Medicine. He is ACSM, Certified Exercise Physiologist, USA Triathlon Level 1 Coach, USA Cycling Level 3 Coach, an ACE Personal Trainer, HIT Science, which is program we've gone over before, running mechanics, gait analysis, and ENDUREIQ. He obviously has done all their programs. I've done the first two, LDT 101 and 102, but he also has done 103 and they're 104. Probably because he works for them, and they're pretty cool programs. So if you go to ENDUREIQ, you can do the programs yourself if you want to learn more. But let's talk to Aaron today and find out more on how we can improve our performance as an endurance athlete. Okay, I'm excited to finally get Aaron on my podcast to talk about my favorite topic, fueling, training, and performing for the endurance athlete. And Aaron is part of the Endurance IQ squad. We're going to talk about everything, how to really improve not just fat loss, but performance and the aging process. Hopefully that comes in as a result of how we train now for our future self.
Debbie, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I've been talking about all these topics we're going to dive into today, fueling and training for the endurance athlete and low carb athlete and how to go about it. And I did ENDUREIQ program we'll talk about what that is with Dr. Dan Plews program last year. And when was it? I don't know. When did Dan win Ironman age group record?
2018.
Yeah. So that's when I started coming across Dan and everything kind of started to grow finally in the endurance world. And I've been doing low carb endurance work since, 2007. And so it's really fun to see how much this industry's finally grown for endurance athletes, because we'll talk about why, makes sense when you're doing an Ironman or 50K race or a marathon, we should be hopefully burning fat as our main fuel source and carbs are a backup fuel tank, and how important it is to figure out how to train and eat that way to be a fat adapted athlete and all the other variables in our training. We'll talk about that. But Aaron, what brought you into this space and how did you start working with ENDUREIQ? Or what is ENDUREIQ before that?
It's all good. Before my endurance career, I was a baseball player and did a whole lot of high intensity training, but I didn't take in a grand amount of carbohydrates. When I came into endurance initially, you kind of fall victim of hearing you got to have massive amounts of carbohydrates. So early on, in my competition career, I really did not like the amount of carbohydrates in the diet that I was having to consume to maintain energy levels. And with that, I am a research-brained individual, so I really started to dive into some of the science behind it, and that's where I ended up coming across Dan. And Dan at that point had been involved in low carbohydrate diets for a number of years and had shown a great amount of success and research behind that success, which made me dive a little bit deeper. And with that, implementing that low carb lifestyle for most of my training really fit everything that I had done up to that point. I felt more comfortable. I didn't feel like I was just scarfing down, whether it be sugars, whether it be pastries. I just didn't feel comfortable with that. So this was just a more comfortable lifestyle.
Yes. It is more comfortable in the gut. You don't have to feel
Absolutely.
bloated and comfortable exercising. I know when I was doing Ironmans, I started in 2001 until I stopped in 2013, but I would be doing everything I was told to do when I first started, and would be throwing up, TMI, the entire bike ride because I was trying to pack in all this stuff. And I was doing all the liquid drinks. I remember trying every year, I'd be trying a different formula of some drink mix, take every hour of the bike. I had the markers on my bottle, and then I had my hammer pills. I was taking every hour my pill bags. And I remember one year, again, TMI, I got to the run and I was like throwing up everything I just took in of all the powdered ENDUREIQ, like everything I was like forcing down. And then when I started to think outside the box and experiment, I think back in 2005, and got into this space. But, back then there wasn't UCAN, there wasn't S fuels and all these, great fuel sources we have nowadays. But I know when I finished racing in 2012, I was doing different type of fuel. I was experimenting, and just, we'll talk about fueling for endurance events versus HIIT training, but it is, just it's fascinating how it's evolved, but how we all kind of came from that background. I know Leighton of S Fuels, we interviewed him a few months ago, and how we all have our own reason or why for getting into here. Like, okay, this did not work for me. So it's just people that actually started thinking, okay, why do the same thing over and over again if it's not working?
Right. Well, and it's a matter of doing it at the highest level that you can. And sometimes if you end up having lack of gut mobility, or you're not absorbing those calories within, whether you're going for middle distance to long distance, you're going to be on a course for, depending on how well you do it, upper end of 3 hours all the way to possibly 16 hours for some in the full. And in that, there's a lot of things that can go sideways. And if you end up just scarfing everything that you can down, it just makes for a very, very long day be even longer.
Yeah, it's funny. I just was in our San Diego Tri Club. We had a meeting. Bob Abbott interviewed someone, and Mark Allen came down and spoke, and he was doing all his race stories. That is so funny because it sounds like it's his first time telling him, but he's been telling these stories forever. And I was talking to him, I was like, you're a pretty good storyteller. All the stories of when they started doing the Fig Newtons, when they first started doing Ironmans, and everyone was down here in San Diego doing those races and early on in the year. So you can kind of see what people started with. And I don't know if that's what kind of went into Power Bar and Gatorade, and everyone was trying to fuel because that's what people are doing, but didn't realize the performance could have been improved if they didn't have all that GI stress.
Right.
So
it's come a long way, that's for sure.
Yeah. So you work with ENDUREIQ as a coach. Talk about what ENDUREIQ is, and we've got the squad behind you, talking about ENDUREIQ squad, and what is an ENDUREIQ athlete and what's it all about?
Definitely. So ENDUREIQ, we are a science and research-based education and coaching platform. Now, with that, our education, we have classes that go over how to devise and develop a training plan, how to set up a proper protocol for heat acclimation, and really performing at the high end in warm climates. We have another one that allows you to kind of understand some of the analytics from some of the numbers that we're able to gather from our Garmin's, from our Polar, from our bike cycling computer information. And then we also had the one that started it all, which is the transition from a normal diet to a low carb, high fat diet. And with that, we've really just tried to educate as many people, but this is more from the long distance triathlon style of things. And then our coaching platform developed from that, where we have the squad, we work off of today's plan. It's a self-coached model where us coaches have developed workouts and plans for the athlete to be their own coach. Then on top of that, we have our one-on-one coaching that I'm a part of, Dan's a part of, and we have Merla, Graham, and Vicente has just come on board with that as well. And in that, we just have one-on-one athletes that we coach directly with. As far as kind of the type of athlete that we have everything from really, it's not just our bread and butter is triathletes, but we have cyclists, we have marathoners, we have the first time triathletes, all the way up to the collection of pros that we all have for one-on-one coaching as well.
Yeah, and I think it would gain some popularity because the winner of Ironman Hawaii last year was trained by Dan Plews. Right?
Absolutely. Chelsea she's as good of an athlete as she is a person, but she definitely had the rocket ship send a lot of interest up on ENDUREIQ. The recent release of Dan signing up with Sam Long has also been another heavy hitter there. So Dan also coaches Jan van Berkel, and on top of that, Javi Lopez as well.
So what do you think in the industry, for a long time?
Javier Gomez, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I knew. I was going to say that. I'm thinking Javier. So what do you find is that motivator from a traditional fueling plan and training, getting these pro triathletes, what's making them kind of make the switch to the low carb endurance and training program?
When we break down the science, it makes everything kind of fall into place. Yes, we don't argue the fact that we need carbohydrates to perform at a high level. What we try to do is operate off of more fat oxidation to reserve more of those endogenous carbohydrates so we can utilize them later in the run, later parts of the bike. Here, when we start to break down you only have 2,000 calories that you can store from glycogen or carbohydrate stores. Some of those are going to be reserved for brain function and organ function, compared to the 40 to 45,000 calories that we are able to put together and store in the body, no matter what type of body type. When you have that resource from fat, 40 to 45,000 calories is enough energy to really have you go from Maine to Georgia at a moderate speed. That's a pretty decent span of distance there. So when we break down that information of how efficient we can be if we do the proper practice and really dive into improving fat oxidation rates, what our athletes find out that it's a more efficient way to go about training. It's a better way to recover. And ultimately, it's a more cleaner fuel source. So therefore, we're not creating as much oxidation through the body or mutated cells that could end up possibly causing cancers and other things like that down the road.
Yeah. So proper practice. So is that, training the body to be more efficient at burning fat at higher heart rates and be able to test, in their training, figure out how they should train. We talked about the 80-20, that 80% of the time they're doing that lower heart rate training, 20% of the time they're doing more the higher intensity interval training.
So the way that we talk to our athletes about this is we want to take the time to digest what the goals of that particular workout are. Mm-hmm. And based on what those goals are, that's typically going to attack one of our three main energy systems within the body. Based on that, we want to then maximize our opportunity to utilize that particular energy system. So if you're going to kind of talk about that 80-20 philosophy that you just brought up, 80% of the time we want to go super easy. We want to create mitochondrial density. We want to develop capillary response. And also the goal in that phase should be to increase fat oxidation. With that, you are going to go very, very easily well below the LT1 or up to the LT1 heart rate zone. And with that, you are going to utilize an oxidized fat as long as you do not introduce high amounts of carbohydrates, high amounts of sugar. So within these particular practices and these particular workouts, what we are going to advise our athletes to do is introduce fats or proteins within that workout. Leading through the first 2 hours, we will just keep with a Can we start over there? I kind of I went down a rabbit hole there that I wasn't too happy with.
Yeah. Hold on. Okay, so going back to the 80% of the time, what's the purpose of that for training there?
In the 80% training zone, what we want to do is really have easy training. So what this is considered aerobic development. And the philosophy within this particular practice is to increase mitochondrial density, capillary response, and often fat oxidation. So within that 80%, we are often going to be going at very, very controlled and moderate outputs where we are going to increase the amount of fat oxidation. So here, what we are going to recommend our athletes to do going into that particular workout is, one, you can go in fasted, but again, that's going to be on kind of that athlete to athlete situation. The other thing is going into that workout with a predominant fat and protein source. With this, we are not going to do anything to stop or blunt fat oxidation. So anytime that we create or we input higher sugars or carbohydrates, what we are going to do is we're going to close down the GLUT4 in the pancreas, which is going to prevent some of fat oxidation taking place. So by starting that workout with a fat or protein source, we are going to keep level spike-free insulin levels, which is going to allow us to really start to dial in and oxidize fat at our highest capability. Now, with that, we are going to recommend our athletes to start off with either water or electrolytes, and then kind of maintain that for the first 2 hours. Now, depending on how the athlete has progressed through the metabolically flexible aspect of things, so how well they metabolize fat and how well they metabolize carbohydrates, it's going to get a little bit different from that particular time forward. The more metabolically flexible athlete, we can continue to drive that time zone out while still taking in water and electrolytes and preventing that carbohydrate. Where some athletes that are a little bit more carb dependent will start to have to funnel in a little bit of carbohydrate at that 2-hour window. Now, what we are going to do to try to drive that number over time is workout over workout of these types, we're going to try to extend that time out. So that individual that maybe went 2 hours, the next week we're going to try to drive that up to 215, 225. And then we're going to continue to try to drive that into the 4 and 5 hour mark. Now, at certain points, we are going to then start to add in more fat at that point because we do not want to create too much of a calorie deficit. But that's kind of our thought process of kind of driving that window of extending the ability to oxidize fat.
So we're training the body to improve their ability to oxidize fat. So use fat for fuel for longer durations at higher heart rates, or just figure out, ideally testing where those heart rates are on a treadmill test. How do you know where those numbers are?
So substrate utilization can come from a metabolic test, whether it's running, whether it's biking. Typically, we like to recommend the first one coming from that bike, because as far as triathlons, that's typically where you're going to spend a majority of your time. Yeah. And if we have a better grasp of how you're burning energy within that discipline, it's going to allow us to maintain and keep those endogenous carbohydrate stores for longer periods. But really, with your question about the intensity, what the goal is the first increase the ability of how long in duration that you can go without having to add carbohydrates. Then at a certain point, we can start to increase the wattage or the intensity to then start to drive how well we still manage. There is going to be a point where you're going to cross over, but that substrate test can give us a better idea of how you are utilizing your energy and where that point is of where your fat max is, which is kind of where you put out the most watts while still burning the most amount of fat.
So do you test people if they can't do metabolic test? If you, like, I talked to PNOE doing their metabolic testing, and I'm about to pull the plug to spend a lot of money so I can do that on athletes here and wherever I go. But the other way we've talked about forever is Phil Maffetone's, the max aerobic function heart rate. Is that a good place to start, to say the 180 minus your age plus or minus 5, trending where you are?
Often that is a good place to start, but it's a little bit more complicated from also the feel of the athlete. We are going to recognize that one athlete we might be able to take through a 4-hour fasted like bike, and they never end up needing carbohydrates. We could take another athlete that's not going to make it past 90 minutes, maybe 100. So it's really, it is a good place to start, but there is kind of that perception of feel. What we recognize and what we coach some of our athletes in those early times is, as we're going through that transition, we are pulling carbohydrates from your workouts earlier in that workout. We need to be perceptive within that workout. When you start to feel energy start to drop, we might need to start to add a calorie or a carbohydrate at that point. So it has a little bit of that. We're going to feel our way through it on the early days. Now, the heart rate guided zones are going to 100% be from testing, from whether it be the math test or like we do the FTP or a 5K time trial from a running or bike standpoint, get their maximum heart rate, get that kind of threshold heart rate, and then we design zones from those heart rates.
Yep.
We're going to stick somebody in that zone 2 and then extend that time out that they need to start actively adding carbohydrates in that case.
So going back to training, how we train, doing 80% of the time at that lower heart rate, fat oxidization, to want to improve the fat ox rates. Now, looking at my little cheat note chart for my program here. So if we're doing, I have this in little plastic cover case to look for clients, but if they're doing endurance training, so they're saying no calories or to low carb fuel, 90 minutes, hour 30, 2 hours, 2:30. And then after about 3-hour mark, that's when you could have low carb fuel. So you're just saying under 3 hours is water electrolytes is all you need if you're truly fat adapted for men and women?
In that particular case, yes, but we are going to break women and men apart in this particular case, where we want to make sure that we are getting the right amount of calories in. Now, in this particular case, there has been a lot of research shown for, I'm going to say all athletes, but specifically females, where if we go too far into a caloric deficit, hormones start to get thrown off, and that's where things really get tricky for females. One of those, we're also going to ask the question of, are you hormone regulated or are you not? Because that is also going to have a factor in kind of the directioning that we're going to take in that case. But with that, what we might recommend the female athlete is to start adding calories a little bit sooner than that, but it's going to be from the fat and protein source rather than having to rely on carbohydrates still.
Yeah, I just find this been my own personal experiment because N equals 1. And I've been doing fasted, since 2009, I started doing more fasted workouts, doing the fat coffee that I drank way too much of early on in my career. I was like bulletproof coffee champion and not eating. But then over the years, I find that, well, yes, I can do a 3-hour bike ride without anything but water and electrolytes in my water. But like I was asking before, could I have been stronger, gone faster, hit a little bit more power, have more energy? So if it's taking like ketone IQ in the middle of the bike ride, or if I have like the S Fuels train drink that just gives me a little bit of calories, or is it okay to give permission to eat? Because I think a lot of times we get so set listening to this information that we think, oh, I'm going to go, 3 hours. Oh, I can go 4 hours and I don't need to eat, but I would have actually felt better if I had half a bar or, something. So I think it's listening to your body, because I did this for so long and my thyroid hormones are all in the garbage again. So I think I was doing, as a female that already had adrenal exhaustion starting 2013, that my cortisol and thyroids are really low. So I always experiment like, well, yes, I don't need to eat and I don't like eating when I exercise, but I could have a little thing as S-Fuels Train in there, or I've been trying this Laird's bar that has mushroom adaptogens in it and be okay. And it won't spike my blood sugar. So I think it's, that's why we have coaches to have people play around and work on it, because it is, yes, to go fasted, but having the electrolytes, but knowing when you as an individual athlete might feel better adding in. And as we talked before, is about what did I eat the day before? Because a lot of times I train long, for example, on Saturdays, and Fridays I get busy and I don't have time to eat or forget to eat, or it's just not in the schedule. that makes a difference of, okay, can I eat the time when I go for a bike ride on a Saturday, and then what did I do the day before? When did I stop eating? I think that goes all into it, because you were talking about what did you eat the dinner before? Was that at 3:00 or was it 7:00? And looking at so much of that information is a big factor into your fueling plan.
I agree 100% with that. And within that one workout, there are going to be a lot of other factors that are going to go involved. And one thing that I also recommend or advise my athletes to pay attention to after that long bike ride or after that long run, pay attention to how ravenous you are. If you come out of that workout and you can't get satisfied the rest of the day, you're just kind of sitting in the pantry looking for things to speak to you to eat. So what I would recommend is kind of evaluate, as you said, look at what you did the day before, look at what you did leading into, look at what you did in that particular workout, making subtle adjustments there to prevent that from happening. Because if we are kind of in that ravenous place, we obviously have left the body lacking something. Therefore, we need to integrate something that's going to prevent that from taking place again. And it's a matter of assessing what took place and then putting something in its place, whether it be before the workout, whether it be during the workout, to prevent that ravenous side of you coming out after the workout.
If you're going to binge for the next 4 hours, it's probably you didn't eat enough. So it goes out to that low energy availability for men and women athletes that we talk about in the program. That I think like Fridays I'll lift and go for an easy run, and then I need master's swimming, and usually I work and then, have early dinner, but then it's like lunch doesn't have time for lunch because I'm going to eat dinner at 5. And so it's just like, oh, I only ate one really good meal and I'm trying to hit my protein goals. And you're supposed to get 30, 50 grams of protein every 4 hours. And then that doesn't always happen. So I think there's so much to fueling and training the athletes that you're performing great on that low bike ride day, but you have to plan ahead and actually prepare in your head when you're going to eat and what can you eat. And if you're working and if you're, doing workouts, you have to really organize in advance your fueling plan.
Food prep and fuel planning is one of the most important things that I feel athletes can do, just because if it's there, it takes the guesswork out, but two, it also kind of removes that decision of, okay, well, what am I going to have? It's right there. Let's just grab it. Let's go. I'm supposed to take this at 11 o'clock. I'm going to take this at 11 o'clock. It's going to fit perfectly within that 2 o'clock workout or whatever time that might. It's just kind of planning that specific out. And especially it's extremely vital going into those big days. You want to make sure that you do have the calories, you are hydrated. So making sure that the days leading into that, you're just not putting it on the back shelf and thinking that it's going to work out on its own.
Yeah. And it goes back to talking about fasted morning exercise, after that breakfast comes after you work out, that you have, good quality protein, nutrient dense whole foods. And it's easy to, get home, shower, got to get ready and get to work. And you're like, oh, I still haven't eaten yet. So that's why I think it gets in trouble. Me personally is, I had to plan ahead. Example today, I went for a run at the beach and did speed intervals and did some leg work, hill repeats, and then came home, showered, and then I had to get on a call. And, I had to plan that, I had 9 a.m. open before my 9:30 call. And luckily I have a husband that cooks and heated up food for me. So I had, extra burger that he made yesterday with cheese and bacon, and then a half a potato that he made with bacon. And it was just because I swim, as I said, 11:45. So I have to plan, or else I don't eat. Or you could do that, decision-making fatigue. You're going to go get a bar or something that's processed. And ideally we're eating our nutrition from real food that has the nutrient dense quality sources of food, not the crap. That I think that's when you get in trouble. If you don't plan ahead, you eat crap.
Well, and that's something that I always or tell my athletes is that if we're put into a decision at that point, our brain kind of takes the wheel in that case. And sometimes when we see something that's going to look good to us, and our brain is then going to say, well, we're going to grab that. And next thing you know, it most likely is not going to be the most efficient, because it wasn't our body that made the choice. It was our just saying that looks good.
Yeah. But if you're at your own home, hopefully you don't have that crap in your house.
That is true. And we try to remove that, because I often tell athletes, if you don't have it in your house, you're less likely to go, yeah, I'm going to go drive to the store to pick up that. I'm just going to eat something here.
My trouble is if you go to work, say, sometimes I go work at a coffee shop and there's nothing to eat. And then there's like, okay, I can have their gluten-free avocado toast, or I can have a gluten-free banana bread and get some butter on it. It's like, okay, that's not a good option. So it's easier sometimes just not to eat. But anyways, so I want to also talk about that 80% is endurance training, as we're training for, say, an Ironman or a 50K trail run or marathon cycling event. But what if we are adding in, or when should we add in that 20%? What is the 20%? And then how do we fuel and train for that?
So the 20%, based on what your weekly volume is going to be, is going to, of course, kind of have a little bit of a trigger of how frequent that 20% is. So for some that might be in that 30 hours, that's going to be far more time invested on swim, bike, and run in an intense fashion than it's going to be somebody that's doing 8 or 9 hours worth of training. So with this, we traditionally want to make sure that we implement some of that high intensity, because with that low intensity, as we talked about, one of the things that we're trying to improve is the overall mitochondrial density. Now, with the higher intensity work, that's also going to allow our mitochondria and biogenesis to get a little bit more efficient in the transition to take nutrients and turn it into and convert it into energy at that case. So by adding that 20%, whether it be VO2 max work on run, bike, or swim, whether it be threshold work on any one of the three, we want to make sure that we are implementing this particular work based on what phase you're in. Now, as you get a little bit closer to kind of race specific, that's going to take more of the form of kind of sweet spot or steady state effort, race simulation style work. But up until that point, early in the season, when you're, say, in your general base build, you're going to have 80% of that on that endurance or aerobic building. Then you're going to take 20 of that and dedicate it towards whether it be VO2 max or threshold work. Now, with that, we are most likely going to tap into the anaerobic glycolytic energy system in that case, which is kind of that energy system that's going to really kind of give us from that roughly about 11-second mark to up to 5 minutes in that case. So there we are going to be, if we do not, so in this case, Debbie, we, depending on the length of that training session, could determine and give us the idea of what and when we need to add carbohydrates with that. At the start, we still want to be able to oxidize fat, but we want to take in some of that from endogenous carbohydrate stores. So that's going to be from some of the food that we have consumed in prior meals. So with that, you roughly, if you're eating some carbohydrates, you're going to have anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes of energy to burn from endogenous carbohydrate stores at that point. So if that workout does not fall outside of that timeline, you might not have to introduce carbohydrates within the workout. Now, if you kind of get past that 60 minutes, that might be the time where you want to start to add maybe 20 or 30 grams of carbohydrates to get you to the end of that routine. But going in, one of the things that we coach our athletes is maybe taking that carbohydrate, upping the carbohydrates on that last meal, the dinner before. And what that's going to do is increase your endogenous carbohydrate stores, and then you're going to be able to allow that endogenous carbohydrate to fuel some of the high intensity bouts that you're going into that next day.
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts there. I think that's what we talk about. Fasting is 12 to 15 hours overnight from your dinner until after your workout. So I think that's reasonable, is that 12-hour. And I know Ben Greenfield, I've done his coaching program working as a coach for them. And that's what we suggest, is the 12, 15-hour based on research. So it's not like you're doing, I think it gets confusing for athletes when they hear about this fasted exercise. It means I just did a 24-hour fast and then I'm going to go do a workout. It just means fasting. What would your definition of being fasted is? Not eating before, but I did eat before I went to bed, or I did eat 6 o'clock the night before and I'm working out at 6 a.m.
So really in that, there's a couple of different models that you could pull from. It's just kind of what your belief system is. I might look at that more as a 6 to 8 hour fast in that particular case, whereas you talked about it could be 12, 14 hours. So it really is just kind of the coaches or that athlete's feeling of what a true fast is. Now, if, again, it's going to come into what is that fast leading into. Now, anytime that we go and expand a 12 or 14-hour fast, I would think that like that endogenous carbohydrate that I talked about is going to be a little bit more depleted in that case. So you are not going to have the same reserves that if you did in a 6 to 8 hour fast. Mm-hmm. So I think that right there would need to come into a little bit of the play of the mind of the athlete. Is if it's a little bit extended past that 8, I might not have, based on what I also had in that previous meal, 8 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours before, what was that, what like macronutrients were across the board in that? And if your macro in carbohydrates was low there too, I would expect that high intensity workout is going to be a struggle. It's going to be a tough one. And as you talked about a little bit earlier, where if I would have taken in a little bit, would that have given me more watts? Would that have given me a little bit more effort and ability to push a little bit harder, a little bit longer? And I think the answer in that case is a yes. I would not look at a 12 or 14 hour fast, especially with maybe that last meal being depleted in carbohydrates, and expect to have a great showing in that high intensity work. I would more bring that down closer to 6 or 8, have carbohydrates in that meal, and then allow those to be stored within the muscle, and then utilize that as your energy through the early part of that routine. And if the routine extends, then adding a little bit more of a carbohydrate base to keep that energy high.
And that's why I think you need a coach to help you work it out. Because for me, I tend to eat lunch at 3 o'clock, and that's kind of my dinner. So I don't eat a lot or anything unless I'm hungry, because I'm trying to just go, if you're hungry, eat, not ignore that. It's like, oh, I already ate, I'm done for the day. Right. But I'm trying to pay attention to my body. If I feel like I'm hungry, I'll go eat something. But my main meals, say 2 to 3 p.m. If I'm not eating until, I'm not eating anything but maybe some heavy cream in my coffee, because I can't do it black. And my spin class, say, is 6:15 in the morning, and I'm going to lift weights for half an hour before. That's when I think, oh, that's been a long time since I ate. And then did I have any carbs? Because we have this fear of carbs. So I'm trying to add like potatoes, root vegetables as my carbs, put them in with my protein fats. So for example, there, if it's 6:15 in the morning, my workout's not a fat burning workout. I'm trying to do power and get my, we're doing 30-second, minute to 2-minute intervals I want to hit it hard. So it has to be, what is the purpose of that workout? Am I trying to get more power output and have a big like win for how hard I can go get my heart rate up high? It's not about burning fat. So I don't care if I'm in fat burning mode, because that's not the goal of the workout. Right. So then I think, oh, I was talking to Leighton, if I do a little S fuels train and some water, would that be okay, or a little squeeze of gel? But that's, so opposite of my thinking forever, is like not have anything till afterwards, because I don't want to spike my blood sugar. But then I have to go, what is the purpose of the workout? It is not to burn fat. It's to perform better.
Well, and that, we talked about it earlier. It's kind of diagnosing what that goal and what physiological adaptations you want to get from that particular workout. And when I hear you going into your strength workout, so you are going kind of in, whether it be the ATP CP system or you're going into the anaerobic glycolytic energy system.
Yeah.
You are burning those dwindled carbohydrates that you already had on your body. So when you then go into a very, very tough bike routine, you're going to really, I just see the energy levels being very, very on the non-optimal side, because you just depleted what you're going to be pulling most of your energy from in that case.
Yeah. And I'm just using myself as an example.
Right.
I just started this in January, so I've just done it 2 months, but it made me curious, like how many of us are stuck in that mindset that I need to do 0 calories and eat 0 fuel source before a workout. But it goes back to like, okay, I'm going for a long run. Yeah, I want to be burning fat for an 1.5 to 2 hour run, going for a long bike ride. But if I want to work on, like today was speed run day, if I want to go 2 minutes high, recover 2 minutes hard, it depends on the purpose of that workout. So I think we need to be open-minded to go, okay, what is the purpose of the workout? Because most of our listeners, I'm finding, because they're reaching out to me, are like me, type A, driven, ambitious, high charging athletes, that we take all this information and we overdo it. We take fasted exercise. We take everything to the extreme, and we don't find that middle of the road. It's like all or none. And it's like, what if I am doing a speed workout? That is not a fat burning workout. That is an anaerobic workout. So how should I best prepare for that workout to improve my output? Right. So that's my questions. Cause I think for me, I've been low carb fasted workout for how many years, and your body gets used to it, but I don't have that full speed. So I was listening to Dr. Andy Gaplin on Huberman Lab. Do you listen to that one? It's 3.5 hours long. I have to listen to it over and over again, but it made me like, you're right. Cause if you don't have that ability to get up and go and sprint, maybe we should add some timing of carbs in that workout if you suck at speed.
Right. Well, and that conversation I've had with multiple athletes, where they've told me in the past them and high intensity have never been in like the equal speaking field. Yeah.
Like Forrest Gump, I can go forever, but speed work, I'm like area of opportunity, right?
Right. So you end up diving into the conversation with that particular athlete, and what you find out is that how they're fueling that particular workout is completely counter to what is going to provide them with the biggest gains for that particular workout. And in a number of cases, I've seen athletes who have completely moved away from doing any type of threshold or VO2 max before working with me, come back to it, and they're like, holy cow, I got better. My 5K time, I just PR'd a 5K or whatever it might be. And it's, well, because we were able to introduce this in the right context. And we really work with that kind of thought process of context over content, where if we start to answer what the goal is, what do we need to accomplish, then we can start to fill in what the content is. But if you never take the time to get the context, putting content in is just going to make it for a jumble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's important to note that, because I feel like people listen to the 80% part and 20%, but don't match their fueling with their training. And that's what I'm trying to get across people. It's be open to adding something. Cause we have a Keto for Endurance group page on Facebook that my friend started, and people, I always feel like they're like, yeah, I'm going forever without eating anything. I can do this long bike ride and just have water and electrolytes. And I always say, yeah, what's your speed? Could have you gone faster? When should it's okay to eat? So we get scared of eating, even if it's fat and protein, that won't spike. Right. It's just like now we're getting to have a different type of eating disorder for an athlete, that we're scared of food and we rather does not eat because we don't want to be out of ketosis and fat burning. And I think it gets a little confusing for people what's best for them as an individual.
And another thing is, I think it's important to find a safe space to have these conversations. I think sometimes there are dynamics in chat rooms and other places where it becomes more defensive than an actual conversation. And having an open dialogue with this, I find to be very, very important, because you might not even agree with what they're saying, but at least you can trade some ideas and make some new assessments and evolve your thought process to a different thought process and find out, okay, well, there might be another way to do this or go about this in an efficient way. And I think sometimes in some of those arenas, you end up asking a legitimate question, and then the masses end up, I don't want to say beat you up, but put you in a defensive manner, and then you just end up getting timid and back. And I think that, Debbie, ends up creating a worse environment for that athlete, because now they don't have an outlet to go to ask that question and get some quality directioning, when that's what they were really looking for, that connection support in that group for.
Yeah, no judgment. Yeah. Share and support each other, but don't judge. Everyone's different.
Absolutely. And having the open dialogue, because there are more than one way to get from point A to point B. And it's just, there's more resourceful ways for individuals, and being open to take those in and try them out. Yeah. It's gonna help anybody.
So I know I'd run out of time with you, because this is my favorite topic, but train low, race high. What would you describe that as? I know we just have 10 minutes, but that, and then also we didn't get to the fat adaptation process of people switching over, which I've done in a previous podcast on my own from what they talk about. So train low, race high is always a big question. Talk about what that is.
So train low, race high is, kind of what it says. It's training low on carbohydrates with the impression of racing high. Now, the race high standpoint is also going to translate in your race simulations. It's also going to translate in some of those higher intensity workouts that we just talked about. But it's predominantly getting if you're living by that 80-20%, that 80% is very, very low intensity, and you want to increase your fat oxidation. So in that, we want to decrease the amount of carbohydrates. There is no reason to allow 100% of that 80% to be driven by carbohydrates. In some people, it could very well be 100% of that 80% could be driven off of low carbohydrate. In other cases, it could be 80%, 70% of carb that you need. But in that low carb or train low, race high, it's just managing the carbohydrates to a lower amount. It's not being keto. It's not restricting yourself to 10, 15, 20 total grams of carbohydrates a day. It's fueling the activity and fueling the exercise that you have. So if you are in 80% aerobic work, let's take in the nutrients from fats, from proteins, to allow the body to adapt and drive the amount of fat we're able to burn within those particular workouts. And in that, it's going to allow that reserve of our endogenous or stored carbohydrates to allow us to get to the back portion of that event and have the energy to go kick ass.
Mm-hmm. So if you're doing a race and you want to kick ass in a race, you're not just trying to finish it. So you're going to be higher heart rates. You're going to be burning more carbohydrates. You might be close to that metabolic crossover point when you're racing. So on the kind of the ENDUREIQ, Dr. Dan Plu's method of building up, he has kind of a taper. So if you're doing So I must say the low carb daily average doesn't necessarily mean you're 50 grams a day, because that's more people that are not athletes. I think people that are athletes, endurance athletes, especially triathletes, are training a lot more than a normal person. And your carb that intake normally might be, like Dan suggests, like 100 to 130 grams is a typical for athletes. And I know Ben Greenfield said he's had people up to 200 to 300 grams if people are like crazy athletes. So it depends on the person. But so say that's your day-to-day kind of average intake is, say, 100 grams of carbohydrates, of nature's quality carbs, not crappy carbs. And then leading up to race, suggestions on, adding in a little bit more carbs if you are doing more of a anaerobic race pace intervals in a race.
3 to 4 days out, we start to increase 50 to 60 grams of carbohydrates to that total a day. So the key that I recommend my athletes is we don't want to just take them all in at one place. We want to do it kind of in a drip effect, because our body does have an amount that it's going to be able to absorb per hour. So I recommend that total going up from, whether it be 100, 130, 140 grams, to just kicking that up to 50 to 60 grams on top of that per day, but spreading it out through the course of the day so it's not coming through 2 or 3 or 4 meals. Because what I want to make sure that you do is you absorb all of the carbohydrates that you are taking, and we are starting to build up that endogenous carbohydrate store. So when we hit and toe that line, our stores are going to be fully ready to go from that case. So our recommendation is to start to pick up 50 to 60 grams of carbohydrates 3 to 4 days out. Then going in on race morning, we advise to avoid any type of sugar. So the amount of athletes that I have tell me either they take a cup of applesauce, a banana, blueberries, that's the first thing that I remove from that. Now, if we
race day morning.
On race morning, yes. And if we take in a carbohydrate, it's typically I push more towards a resistive starch, whether it be nice rice cooked the night before, or oatmeal or overnight oats that were prepared the night before. These are going to go into the system a little bit differently and not spike your insulin levels in this case. Because the last thing that we want to do is put all this time into our training regime to increase and drive our fat oxidation rate, to go in, have a big sugary breakfast, and throw everything off from the get-go before we even get to the start line. So pulling away from some of the sugar, just eating enough to get yourself satiated. Hit that start line. We go through the swim in that particular case. You're not going to be able to fuel when you're swimming. Coming out, I traditionally advise my athletes, depending on if it's a full or a half distance triathlon, we're going to introduce carbohydrates roughly around that 30-minute point on the bike, and then start to take them consistently throughout the rest of the event. Now, our work with S Fuels, we like to utilize that highly branched cyclic dextrin, which is the active carbohydrate in the Race Plus formulas. And with that, it's just a very highly absorbable carbohydrate, and also is highly gut mobile. So it moves through the gut and doesn't allow things to start building up. And in that, we're going to recommend our athletes to take in between 40 to 60 grams of that highly branched cyclic dextrin per hour, because that kind of falls right in what you're able to absorb on an hour-to-hour basis.
So that's 60 grams per hour, but you do it ideally like 20 grams every 20 minutes kind of thing.
Roughly. It really depends on the conditions and the athlete. Some might just, every time that they tick over a 5-mile split, which might be 12 or 13 minutes for some, boom, take a swig. For others, every time you have your watch beat for a 15 or 20 minute segment, take a sip. But it's going to be kind of developed and specific to that particular athlete.
Yeah. I'm picturing Ironman Hawaii when it gets to be really hot and windy, and then you're like, last thing I want to be doing is taking anything. And then especially when your fuel gets warm and then it tastes horrible, and then you're like, I'm not taking it.
It's for a long day in that case, though.
Yeah, that's when hopefully you want to have that good aerobic engine developed, because when you can't take anything in, you can depend on your ability to burn fat. So
absolutely.
So there's so much more to go into. Anything else you want to finish or say where to learn more, links I can share?
Definitely ENDUREIQ.com is a place to get some resources. All of us coaches have links on there as well. So you can schedule one-on-one consultations. You can also go through one-on-one coaching. We have all the information for our library of courses. And also, in addition to that, we have all the information on the squad and the training platform that we have and operate on a day-to-day basis. So that's going to be the first place. Another place is the S-Fuels is a great resource for us. So we traditionally point people to S-Fuels, which is sfuelsgolong.com, or longer, I should say, .com. And there are a number of resources of transition guides and other resources that will help you kind of guide your way through kind of moving to more of an endurance, low carb, healthy lifestyle, or as we've dubbed it, right fuel, right time.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I did some videos with their handouts because they're such great free resources on the S-Fuels site. People can grab those handbooks. They're really good. If people go to guides, I'll do another video on that to follow up with this one. But I think there's so much to learn. And if people, this early in the year, start figuring out how to train and fuel your best for endurance events, because it makes a difference and your performance and your recovery. And if we talk about longevity, aging process, I'm doing functional lab testing now on athletes, and I really can see the difference of people that are overtraining, under recovery, and all their dysbiosis, parasites, H. pylori, does this total mess in their gut because stress is on, immune system's on, stress is on, your blood sugar is up, stress is on, everything else is messed up. So,
well, and that's another thing that I also talk to my athletes about is stress is not bias. All stress adds up, whether it be from your kids, whether it be from training, whether it be from work. It's all filling up that bucket. And the bucket doesn't care what type of stress it is. So if you can't manage the stress that's coming in from work or the stress that's coming in from family, sometimes you have to back off of your training in that case to manage health, because it is something that you can control.
Or close your business like I did in 2019 and moved from Seattle to San Diego, looking up to the mountains and near the beach. You can do that too. Change your whole life. But yeah, that's my whole platform, is chronic stress impacts the whole you. And there's a reason why I'm not doing racing anymore, because I broke myself. So that's what my mission is, to help athletes avoid getting to that point. And you can do all this stuff and be preventative, so you can enjoy a long, healthy racing career and do it as you age, because you love racing and you love the community and you have fun with it. But you can easily do it wrong, and a lot of people burn the candle at both ends and overdo it. And as you said, there's no different buckets. Your brain hypothalamus doesn't discriminate which type of stressor. It just all goes into one bucket. So you can easily overfill that bucket if you're doing too much of everything. So beware.
Be smart.
Yeah, be smart. I don't know if people know how to do that either, but
hey, like you said earlier, that's the reason of getting a coach. They kind of pull that craziness down a little bit.
Yeah, pull it down. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show today. And we'll put everything in the show notes, and people can watch this video on the Low Carb Athlete YouTube channel and your favorite podcast app. Thanks.
Debbie, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.